In this episode, we take a look at Project 2025, as well as the apparent moonwalk that presidential candidate Donald Trump has been doing away from it lately. We'll react to the gender controversy involving Algerian boxer Iman Haleev at the Olympics, and we'll discuss a recent story on the technological advancements in making it rain on demand, like the weather. Hello, welcome to the Call Like I See It podcast. I'm James Keys, and riding shotgun with me today is a man who may have, or may not have, been involved in efforts to make it rain when he was younger. Tunde Ogunlana. Tunde, are you prepared to show us what can be done with a handful of stacks today?
Yeah, man. I'm not even going to go any further.
All right. Now, before we get started, if you enjoy the show, I ask that you hit subscribe or like on YouTube or your podcast app. Doing so really helps the show out. I'm recording this on August 4th, 2024. And Tunde, we've seen a lot of discussion over the past few weeks about Project 2025, which is an initiative by the Heritage Foundation, which purports to lay out the plan for what the next Republican president should do with his or her power. The plan is embodied in a 922-page document, and the document is publicly available. And it appears to focus on a couple of main areas, like the concentration of power in the president, in the presidency, for the whole executive branch. Also abolishing government agencies and or making the actors in those agencies more partisan and less kind of rule-based and just, it's a position, it's a job. And also trying to make more fundamentalist Christian beliefs, trying to base more laws and so forth on the sensibilities of fundamentalist Christian. And it's generally a pretty ambitious plan and, like to remake the government. And, the critics of it say that this is a plan to try to take the United States closer to a dictatorship and, curtail liberties and all, and a lot of other things that from a constitutional standpoint would be unacceptable or bad. And some of this controversy, has popped up, and we've even seen Donald Trump, attempt to distance himself publicly, at least, from Project 2025. So, Tunde, to get us started here, what stands out to you, in the Heritage Foundation's Project 2025, and the plans that it's laying out for what it's saying is will be a second Donald Trump presidential term.
No, it's good topic and good questions. What stands out to me we'll be discussing through this conversation. So I'm not going to rattle off a list this second, but
give me the number one. Give me what.
The number one. There's not a number one. There's actually several. Like you said. No, that's what I mean. This is going to be a discussion long thing. So, look, there's the changes to the makeup of federal employees that they will no longer be classified as civil servants who got there based on their merit, maybe over successive administrations through different parties where they get promoted.
And can stay over successive administrations. Correct. Because they're good at whatever they're supposed to be doing. Yeah,
they'll be officially labeled, political appointees. So that's one example. Like you mentioned, alluded to certain of the desires to bring religion more into the function.
Well, let's stop on the first one that you mentioned, though, real quick, because I think that's interesting. Because, the way I see that is like a political appointee would be like the press secretary of the White House, and you understand that's a person getting up there and saying, "Hey, this is what our story is coming from the White House, and that's going to have a partisan lens, and we understand that." We're the type of employees. So that's something that wouldn't change. But what we're talking about would be something like, the medical directors or, people that work in, National Weather Service or, things that people that are supposed to be there because of expertise in a field. And this will go beyond that. This will be go into, Department of Education or Department of Justice, things like that. But where you take areas where there's supposed to be a certain expertise of the worker who's there, and they work on behalf of the federal government at large, and the interests of the government. And you're going to replace those with people who are there to serve the interests of the current president and, their political party, their political apparatus and so forth. So, and in that context, competency may not even be, on initial blush, that competency may not even be the number one thing you're looking for. Some people might be looking for loyalty over competency in that situation. So, I think that's definitely a good place to start, and looking
Yeah.
at what they're talking about here. Let's make things less competent as far as the people.
Well, no, I think, but you got to draw that line out, and I think this is where it's difficult for people because number one, in the United States, no one alive at least has ever lived under that kind of system. I mean, to extrapolate further, if you really get into this thing, it's a manifesto for a third world banana republic. I mean, that's basically what some people, I guess, want to turn the United States into. And I mean that dead serious. Yeah. This what has made, I will say, United States and other Western nations similar, even if they have different governing apparatuses, like parliamentary versus our democratic republic system type of thing, like Canada, Australia, UK, France, Italy. What really separates those countries from the third world banana republics is the separation, number one, of certain things like religion and other things that create passions in people from the actual running of the government. So the idea of a secular government where you have laws that aren't based on, let's say, biblical law. And we see this in the Middle East.
One person's interpretation or one group's interpretation of biblical law.
Yeah, exactly. But not even going that far,
you'll get a bunch of different, but that's the kind of thing that inflames the passions.
Let me just for the purpose of this conversation, just to give an example, you would see countries in the Middle East like Iran or Saudi Arabia that do that with the Muslim faith, right? That they govern those countries from the religious law, which then creates other dynamics in the society, like how women are treated, how other religious groups, or like you said, people that just practice the same religion but a little bit different. So like Shia and Sunni Muslims, we know have issues.
And that's what I'm talking about. They then fight all the time.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Which form of religion should be the basis of the law and so forth.
Yeah, and they can't coexist within the same border. So what happens is the society ends up focusing on those issues instead of issues like technology and developing infrastructure and all that kind of stuff. So that's why I don't
cultural issues, like they end up fighting culture wars instead of creating a prosperous nation.
Correct. And that's a great point because, I mean, think about it. If we look at even this election now in 2024, right now in August of this year, one candidate is talking about their vision for the future. And look, that's a vision many Americans may not agree with, but it's ideas about policy and all that. The other candidate is talking about, the racial makeup of the opposing candidate, meaning it's all culture war stuff, right? And like you alluded to in the beginning of this, that the next topic we'll talk about is about an Olympic boxer. That's a culture war issue that has somehow made it into American political conversations. So what happens is that, yes, I said it as kind of half in jest, but it's unfortunately true that this reads as the manifesto for people who want to take the United States and turn it into a similar type of environment that we see maybe in certain Middle Eastern countries today. And a lot of Americans maybe don't see that long arc of a tie-in, but once you start dismantling certain norms and laws eventually that we've had and held dear in the United States, like the separation of powers, for example, or like we talk about now, making every or large swaths of the federal employee base political appointees. That's a recipe.
That's the one. I wish we would have stayed on that one, because what that reminds me of, really, you say, like the third world banana republic, like that's kind of like the system in Venezuela right now, where and they just had an election, and the reports from the people who counted the votes are like that one side won like 70% of the votes, but the people who were in charge of the elections, those civil servants in charge of the elections, are partisans. They are partisans in favor of the guy that's in charge now that got like 30%, reportedly got like 30% of the vote. And without releasing the results or anything like detailed results and stuff, they just said, yeah, we won, 51%. And it's just like, and they just expect everybody to go about their business. And it's like, well, they got 30-something, there's purportedly 30-some% of the vote. And their answer is, okay, well, we counted everything. You don't get to see it, but just know we got 51%. And so that's the nature of a partisan doing a job versus a civil servant doing a job. And, it really, like when I read the summaries and parts of I haven't read the whole thing, but when I read parts of it and read summaries of it, what stands out to me is really a disdain for the American system. And you've asked the question many a times, like, okay, is America idea or is America a certain group of people? And this seems to really make that clear. Like to them, it's not about the ideals of the American system: separation of powers, separation of church and state, freedom of religion. Everybody gets to practice their own religion and so forth. It's not about those things. What it's about is a certain group of people who get to do what they want to do in the country. And that's what Project 2025 is ultimately about. And they're like, yeah, the things that are stopping this certain group of people from just doing whatever they want are all of these things that are in the Constitution that are creating all these inconveniences. Like, oh man, we got the Department of Justice, but the president can't control them and just allow him to lock up people he wants to lock up. That's a problem for us because we want to be able to, in order to implement our goal, we need to be able to lock people up who don't agree with us, even if they haven't committed a crime yet. And so all of these things that are attacked in the Project 2025 approach to making things more partisan, or getting political appointees in certain key positions, or getting rid of certain agencies and so forth. It's really about saying, okay, we want to take apart the American ideals that would prevent us from shaping America in the way we want, whether the people are on board with that or not. And so that to me is just like, man, they really don't like the fact that you have three branches of government that have checks and balance on one another. Like, and this is stuff that's not like, I'm not speculating here. Like, there's this unitary executive theory where the unitary executive gets to do whatever he wants to do, and it is above the law, and gets to operate the Justice Department and do all these other things. And it's like, wow, like, so that stuff in the Constitution about how the president is subject, is under the law, and it can be checked by the legislative branch or by the judicial branch. You guys just don't like that stuff. And so you want to rewrite things or redo things to get rid of it. So to me, it's the hostility towards the system. And, it's unfortunate in one sense that Americans don't learn to take pride in these features in our system, these things that allow us to ideally have a government that's focused on progress and focused on big picture things, so that we can, as a society, move forward at a rapid pace. And we have been able to do that, because I don't see a lot of pride in the American system when people publish things saying, hey, let's take apart this part of the American system. Let's take down the separation between church and state. And it really says to me that a lot of Americans just don't. Either they don't know they have it, or they just don't have it because they never learned to appreciate it. An appreciation and a pride in these things that really do make America exceptional. It makes us unlike other countries, and so it's unfortunate. But the idea that there's been some pushback against this and people have been raising the alarm is encouraging to me, because this is, if you like the ideals of America, then this thing is a declaration of war on many of those things.
Yeah, no, and it is. And if you think about it, like you said, I mean, the press could be doing a better job of actually really alerting Americans to this. But this is the importance of a free press, right? The idea that the press is not we're not stifled from being able to see this information publicly
and talk about it and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, the thing about this is really interesting about the federal, we're just staying on this thing about the federal employees, because one of the things, and this is the thing, I mean, you're right. I didn't read the 922 pages front to back, but I spent, a lot of time over several days reviewing it and reading chunks of it. And they're very specific on what they want. And it is really a manifesto of changing the United States government as a literal apparatus, like how it works. And so, and when you think about some of the contradictions,
it's written by people. Sorry, just real quick. It's written by people who have served in administrations in large part. So they know this from the inside. Okay, here's when I wanted to, do X, Y, and Z. Like all these civil servants who weren't partisan, or all did this separation of powers thing stopped me from doing it. So here's how we can get around that. And if I want to make a decree based on a religious text, here's what I need to do in advance in order to be able to do that.
Yeah. And here's the thing is that, because I think a couple of things, and my brain's all over the place with this. One is the Heritage Foundations has been the mouthpiece for those, I guess, behind the scenes in power who would like to see this happen since about 1980. And so we've seen through, the last 40 some years, these attempts at trying to get this in the desk of said president. Right. And some of these things, land well and some don't. And you're right. At this point, the nature of the change in the Republican Party means it's been taken over now by people who do believe this stuff. And so what I'm saying is there's a lot of contradiction with the way that the Constitution works. Like, for example, one of the ways they're going to do this thing with the federal employees is by having a screener questionnaire. So basically, they're going to ask people to tell them, the government is going to ask people to tell them about their loyalties and all that. Well, that's probably going to become a violation of the First Amendment.
Correct.
Because the government is not allowed to tell you how to think. And if you like a politician other than the one that's in office, the government is not allowed to, cause you harm from that. And I guess firing you would be considered causing you harm. So there's a lot in this manifesto that does attack the system that we have in place right now, and it's very evident. And so, and another one would be just the
also
separation
just compelling people to have to give all that information. Like that's like freedom of speech means also that you could decline. You say, hey, I'm not going to share that. My personal beliefs. Like it's one thing if you're out there posting on social media, but if you have it to yourself and say, no, well, I'm going to make you tell me this. That goes beyond whether it violates the Constitution outright. It goes beyond the principles that America has espoused for a couple of centuries at this point.
Yeah, and that's when I was preparing for this conversation, James, I really started thinking like, man, the projection is amazing because this is extremely Orwellian. I mean, this is like 1984. You're going to make people have to fill out loyalty questionnaires and stuff for the party. This is like the Nazis in 1930 or Mussolini. Yeah, like and remember, that's why this is all. It's very easy to see if you look at it, or at least from that lens, because similar to the Nazis in Germany and other times this has come up in large societies, they need the ability to get the population in a place where they would accept this, because they can't bring this stuff to us as Americans through the popular vote. That's why Donald Trump, and I know we'll get into this about him distancing himself from this now when there's so much evidence that he supported it in recent years. Because this is the stuff that most people don't like. Most people do like the freedoms in America, right?
They at least don't want to hear it. And whether they like it or not, they at least don't want to hear it. They don't want to think of themselves as going down this path. If you did take them incrementally, they can end up there. But people don't like to be like, oh yeah, let's shut up everybody that I don't agree with. By and large, I mean, most people in America.
But think about what we just talked about. Most Americans, I think, that the whole thing about a loyalty test. Once you actually follow it through, just with a few steps logically, like we just did in this conversation, and say, okay, well, hold on. If I'm not posting on social media and somebody comes ask me, did I vote for this president, or do I believe the 2020 election was stolen? And I say no, and I get fired. That's against the law. The Constitution and the First Amendment don't allow the government to fire employees based on how they view politics. I think a lot of Americans, if they found out that that's what these people want to do and that they would have the power to do it, I guess, because the president now has full immunity, they may not be comfortable with that. So in order to get enough Americans distracted, that's why we got to hear about things like the gas stoves and like transgender people and like all these cultural, and why we got to hear about Kamala Harris being Indian or black, because none of that stuff, that's not policy stuff. That's to get people distracted so that, I guess, the Heritage Foundation, as a version of a deep state, people who are trying to tinker with the government apparatus can be left alone to do it. So when, if somebody wins an election and gets in, this is all just going to happen. No one's going to say, hey, what do you think I should do at that point? They're just going to implement it.
Yeah, I mean, and the thing is that it's distraction, but it's also fear. I mean, and that's always, if you look at any time in societies where people go from open societies, law-based societies to, authoritarian style governments, it's generally because the population was made afraid of something. And so a lot of that is the same as well. It's the making people, trying to otherize people, or trying to say, hey, they're coming for, I guess people, really have a lot of affection for their gas stove. And so they're coming for your gas stove is going to make them really afraid. And so they'll say, hey, yes, protect me from the person coming to take my oven or stove or whatever. And, or anything. I mean, the immigrants is obviously one of the bigger fear-based motivational tactics. One thing I'll point out, but I do want to get to the second part of this, is that the loyalty test, there's no secret behind that. And what that is basically is an attempt to ensure that the people who work in an administration or in the government are loyal not to the Constitution, but to the party or the person, whoever is at the top at that time. Which again is that's something that's very anti-American system. Like the whole point of the American system would be that you trust the Constitution and the rule of law so much that even if you don't win the election, well, we'll still be here 4 more years or 2 more years or 6 more years. And so we'll go for the next one. And so a lot of this stuff kind of looks like they don't trust the Constitution. They don't trust the American system because they're like, hey, we gotta get in and we gotta put all the people that are loyal to me, not loyal to the Constitution in. And that's the departure from the rule of law and so forth. And that's outwardly where it seems like they're trying to go. And I mean, obviously we touched on how this isn't something that would, let's keep moving though. But the thing that, like we had mentioned before, was just kind of how this, if you go out and out say it, like you might be able to back people into something like this if you make them afraid enough and things like that. And some people honestly are just more stimulated by fearful messages. You can get them afraid really easily, and then they're willing to do anything really quickly because they're afraid. And fearful, there are fearful people out there. But when everybody's kind of just, standing, and not in that state of perpetual fear, this type of stuff has shown to be not that popular amongst Americans. And so, Donald Trump, to his credit, he's typically shown pretty solid political instincts in terms of the kinds of things that will help him or hurt him in the public at large. He's been trying to distance himself from this. As this has gotten more coverage maybe like over the course of the month of July, he's tried to pull back and say, oh, well, I'm not a part of that. Or I don't know. He said he hadn't heard of it or didn't know the people, and, throwing out a lot of things as far as just basically saying that he's not a part of this. He doesn't want to talk about it or anything like that. What do you make of that? Especially considering that, like a lot of people who are in this have been talking about his second administration is when they want to do it, and are people that were in his first administration, and again are almost in a sense reacting to some of the what they felt were handcuffs, which we would call the Constitution and things like American ideals, but they were preventing them from doing the things they wanted to do.
Yeah, I look, like you said, Donald Trump is what he is. The amount of times he's denied things that he before was okay with. I mean, we can't even count them on hands and toes and whatever, right?
And truthfulness isn't really his thing.
Yeah.
And I don't think he would deny that. Like he says what he needs to say in the moment. Well, it is. It's just like being truthful, being consistent isn't really his thing. Whatever, he'll say something. He'll say what he needs to say in the moment, and some people think that doesn't hurt you,
but let's keep going. Yeah. Everybody watching this has their opinion made up about Marty, but
I'm saying that objectively. I'm not even saying that as a judgment.
That's why we don't. Yeah. But I'm going to make read a quote that he had at a Heritage Foundation dinner where he spoke. That's my point. I'm just saying
people
that he doesn't know who these people are. And when people like Ben Carson and Ken Cuccinelli are writing chapters in this thing, he doesn't know who anyone is. But he quoted saying, we're going to lay the groundwork and detailed plans for exactly what our movement will do. And it's a good point because, again, this is what it supports what we've been saying on this discussion, that this is a movement. Right. This isn't the normal Republican politics versus Democrats. And we want to keep it within this framework of an argument around something called the Constitution and around how we see ideology
the Constitution being like the sandbox, and we'll all play in that.
Exactly.
Like, this is not that.
Yeah, we're willing to play in that sandbox. That's a great point. Correct. There's somebody now outside saying, no, I'm just going to pee in the sandbox and we're going to do it out here my way. And that's to me what this Project 2025 represents. It is a movement. And here's the thing that I find I'm offended by as someone who appreciates good conservative ideology and its importance in any society, which is this is not a conservative movement. This is a radical movement. These people are radical. They don't want to conserve anything. They don't want to conserve the Constitution. They don't want to conserve the way the United States has behaved internationally. They don't want to conserve, the great allies that we've had post World War II and the way we've kind of dominated the world stage.
They don't want to, but preserving the status quo. That's a really good point. That's a really good point.
So they are radical. It's a radical movement, and I think this is why this maybe helps answer why Donald Trump now feels at least he has to distance himself from it, because again, this is radical, and as more people and voters get to learn about it, they have the similar reaction that you and I seem to be having. And again, this is why this is. The projection of things like deep state and all that, even George Soros and all that, when I think about the amount of billionaires that support this kind of stuff, and the country to go this direction. It's really just, that's why I keep thinking about George Orwell and Ayn Rand. And both of them must be flipping in their graves watching people really close to implementing this in the United States. And it's coming from the crowd that used to tell us to be scared of this stuff, which is interesting to me.
Well, it's interesting. Like, I like the point that you made, just that, kind of how it's just very radical. And, and the people that are leading this are radicals. They're not conservatives. And so what that leads to the understanding of is that essentially these radicals are putting on the clothing of and attempting to appear as conservatives. So it's very important to for them, if they're a wolf in sheep's clothing, basically, like they're saying, hey, we're conservative like you people, and we just want to do conservative stuff. And this document is plainly a radical document. And so Trump recognizes the need to put the sheep clothing back on and say, no, like he recognizes that this is something that would be seen as radical by anybody who looks at it closely and says, and understands that, no, we're not out here doing, showing ourselves as wolves. We have to show ourselves as sheep, that we're the conservative ones, that we're fighting to just keep things in the status quo and stop these other, because remember, they position themselves and say that the other side is radical. So, it's important. So I think he recognizes that need, but the denial it made me chuckle. I mean, honestly, because what it reminded me of, and like we've lived through this over the past couple of years, where like you look at the Supreme Court justices that were appointed by Trump, and even before going back all the way to Roberts or whatever, going back to Bush and everything, just that when asked about Roe, it was always like Roe v. Wade. They were like, oh well, that's settled law, yada yada yada. Like they said what they needed to say at the time. Or should presidents be above the law? No, they say no. They testify no, presidents shouldn't be above the law. But once they got to critical mass in the court, like all of those things they testified to, when they were being vetted for the job, out the window, So this to me seems a lot like that. Like he recognizes that in order to try to get where he wants to go, he can't, as a wolf in sheep's clothing, he has to continue to wear the sheep's clothing and say, look, no, like I don't know who those people are, like yada yada yada. And so it's solid political instinct, is just to say that if I reveal myself as a radical to people who I've been courting that are actually that lean more conservative, then I may lose the support of them, or I may lose at least the undying devotion, at least of some of them that I have. And the interesting thing about the Trump coalition that he's put together is they can't take any leakage. Like he needs people to be fully engaged and fully on board to win elections. This is why, like when you go 2020 or things like that, the party, since the party's hitched his wagon to Trump, they don't perform as well when he's not on the ballot. And it's because he's able to keep that engine, that coalition that they've had, operating close to 100% participation. If they start dropping down, they don't have the margin of error in their coalition, because their coalition is very passionate, but it's relatively small. And so they need everybody there, and then they need to discourage people in the other coalition, because they can't have that coalition operating at near 100%, because then they'll lose. They need that one down. And, which is the comparison between 2016 and 2020. So, I mean, I think the instincts are correct for him to do this. I don't believe him. I mean, I think that it's pretty clear what's going on, but, it's something that, like when he says that, oh yeah, I don't know who these people are. And then on the other side, he says, hey, we're getting it set up so that you don't have to vote anymore. It's like, well, I mean, those two can't be harmonized together.
No, but I think that's like the tell, right? Like, when we talk about the civil service now being all political appointees, the thing about like 30,000 federal employees no longer being just secular employees in a sense that can work under different administrations. They will be loyalists,
an expertise based. Like they're there because they're good at something, not because they're with the passions of the day, so to speak, of whatever.
Correct. So the goal for Project 2025 is for the Trump administration to replace these people with nothing but loyalists. And this is how we get from America, like I said, about a banana republic, or the system that we seem to have liked all these years, to something more akin to like an Eastern European style autocracy, like a Russia or a Hungary, where, there's some political parties and all that to make it look like some people got some options. But when everybody in the government is beholden and is a political appointee of the president, like Putin, then they make sure that they gum up the works so that the election only goes one way every time. So that's
like
why
we just saw in Venezuela. Like we literally saw this in Venezuela. Yeah.
But that's why when Trump's out there last week saying if you just vote this one last time, you're not going to have to vote again. I mean, there's something honest about what he's saying in terms of the goals of the project and the people he's bringing into his administration that he's already put out there, because that's basically what he's saying is,
that's the point.
Well, if you let me in this time, we're going to fix it, which is what he said too, so that you don't have to vote again, which would be the way that they want it, which is then you don't have to get up and leave your house and vote on voting in an election, because it's already going to go that way anyway, just like with Putin and Russia. Nobody watching this believes that Vladimir Putin is winning genuinely honest elections. He might be winning the elections, but they're not honest.
We got to jump, but there's one word I got to look at or just talk about, because you emphasized it there. And he said, we're going to fix it. And so the question is, does he mean we're going to fix it, like repair it, or we're going to rig it? Always talking about rig elections, right?
Yeah.
Or are they going to rig it so that you don't have to vote anymore? And I mean, obviously, that's one of those things where people are going to project the meaning onto it. But I found that wording to be, like you said, a moment of kind of clarity. Like, so you're going to fix it so people don't have to vote anymore, huh? That sounds to me very much like rigging it. So you know what
is the most important one? I know you want to jump, but the fact that they want to ban porn. That's the one we got to yell at.
I'm surprised you didn't lead with that, man. What stood out to you?
I can't believe that is even in writing. I can't believe Donald Trump would put his name behind something like this after he's banged a lot of porn stars and he's bragged about it. And as a consumer of that product, I'm very upset. So I'm just,
like I said, I'm surprised you didn't lead with it, man.
You wouldn't have let me lead with it. That's why I had to sneak this one in on the back, because now he can't stop the show. We already recorded.
Yeah. You snuck it in at the end, man. That was your project 2025 on the show right there.
Yeah, that was definitely. So I had to get it out because we need as many people to know how bad this thing is. That's why.
Band together, like stuff. But no. We appreciate everybody for joining us on this part one of the show. Make sure to join us on part 2 and part 3 as well, and we'll talk to you soon.